Well, as we do on a Monday, we like to check in with the Australian Christian Lobby. Wendy Francis is acting managing director, she's the national leader of politics for the ACL, because there is a new CEO in the mix. But Wendy Francis back with us. Hey, Wendy, welcome back to 2020.
Thanks, Neil. I get confused as to what I am as well.
There's been a little bit of change, and, I'm sure that Michelle Pearce is settling in very nicely into her role now. I know that she's just done a move from Western Australia, and the family's come across the Nullarbor, and no doubt things are settling in very nicely, and we'll look forward to having an opportunity to talk to Michelle very soon once again. Hey, Wendy. When it comes to this misinformation, disinformation bill, I know there's a lot of listeners who are becoming increasingly concerned what these sorts of powers look like. What's the update from your position?
Yeah, at the moment, the government is staying committed to this bill. We're really looking for amendments. If listeners might remember that the LNP, the Liberal and the National Party coalition, they proposed prior to the last election, they proposed a similar idea, to be honest, to censor some of the some more radical ideas on the internet. And so this is not a new idea, but what the Albanese government have done is far, far more than what the Liberal Party were suggesting. And what they've done is that they've written into this bill powers that will actually enable the digital platforms to continue the very misbehaviour that in one way they're trying to rectify, because the social media platforms are notorious of censoring anything that they don't like. Now, this will actually give them a weapon to be able to do that so much more, because the government is saying the social media platforms are going to be responsible for censoring anything that is misinformation, which is an accidental information that's wrong, or disinformation, something that they deem to be purposely wrong. And so, for instance, let's throw some things out there. I believe that there are two genders, male and female, because that's how God created human beings, and that's what he says in his word. So I believe that. But according to the government, that's misinformation or disinformation, whichever way they would like to play that. And so it gives a license to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever social platform there is out there, to censor that and to remove my comment, but not only remove my comment, but remove me from their platform. So it's silencing any debate that would appear to be against the government narrative.
I guess, Wendy, if you're trying to make sense of where this works when the rubber hits the road, talking misinformation and disinformation, if you think of the national debates we've had of recent times, the COVID pandemic, the voice debate is going on right now. There's all the controversy around climate change. And as you've mentioned, of course, sexuality and gender. But then there's ones that are going to be coming into our future too, all of the reflections on our national history. And, issues that when there is a legitimate reason for people to enact some level of civil disobedience to protest what we might think of as bad laws. These sorts of things are all at risk, aren't they? Because a bunch of bureaucrats will be able to they'll be able to dictate what they say is true and what's not.
Absolutely. And we don't have to look very far in the past, do we, Neil, to see that there are some things that have been believed or said to be true by the government that have been found out, well, it's actually not quite like that. And many times over the past years, you can even look at things in health that we've been told this is really important or this is important. And again, as you say, with climate change, that's changing all of the time. So if we're stuck to one government narrative, it removes any ability for ordinary Australians, but also for Australians with a lot of knowledge about these things, to actually comment on and have a civil debate, as you say, respectful civil debate in the most public space that we have these days, and that is on social media.
So misinformation or disinformation, vaguely defined in the bill, anything that the ACMA describes or determines to be false or misleading or deceptive. And if we set this sort of thing in motion, we can only expect that there's going to be all sorts of maybe dictatorial type ways that controlling people comes into the reality, isn't it? This is an issue because out of control, this becomes an issue of control.
Absolutely. And our faith dictates, for instance, marriage. So I believe that marriage is one man, one woman for life. That's what God intended marriage to be. And so even making that statement is not actually according to the law of our land anymore, because marriage, the institution of marriage has been changed legally by our nation. And so even saying that could be seen as being mis or disinformation, and I could be censored for believing my true faith even. So we're talking about a shutting down conscience. We're shutting down even thoughts. It really is thought police, because it's like, I've got to think before I really believe. Am I going to get censored because of this? Am I going to get in trouble? Is there going to be am I going to be removed? Am I not going to be able to continue to have this conversation? So we've got to second guess ourselves all the time at the moment. Is this aligned with the government position? And if it's not, am I in trouble?
Isn't it incredible to think, and rightly so, one person's truth may be another person's misinformation or disinformation. And as soon as you start to have someone who is going to determine what their truth is, or the only truth that's allowed to be talked about, then you have a very serious situation. We'll certainly be monitoring that as we move forward. Wendy, let's get maybe a quick fire update on, there's so many issues, aren't there, that you're dealing with at the Australian Christian Lobby. My encouragement is for listeners to monitor some of the releases and the updates from the ACL, just to keep abreast of the things that are changing so fast. Let's get a little bit of an update. What's happening right now? The Born Alive bill update, and you've got a very peaceful protest that's planned for this. What's happening here?
So the Born Alive bill is something that Senators Antic, Canavan and Babbitt have put forward, and it's gone through committee, and we're waiting for the report. And basically what they've put in their proposed legislation is that every baby will be treated exactly the same in Australia. So a baby that is born alive after an abortion, and this is happening hundreds of times, we know that in the last sort of 10 years, it's happened up to 1,000 times in our nation. So we're talking not a rare occurrence. We're talking something that happens quite regularly. A baby is born after abortion. That baby should be given the same treatment as any baby born alive after birth. And so that's basically their legislation. We've got a baby booty protest planned for next Wednesday outside Federal Parliament. Thousands of baby booties have been sent from around the nation. People have knitted these baby booties with love. They have prayed over these baby booties. And so that will be a demonstration, a very, very visible demonstration of the babies' lives that have been lost. And then following the protest, those booties are going to go to pregnancy support groups right around Australia as well. So every single one of them will go to a precious little baby. But we're so grateful for the senators who've brought this bill forward. It's a federal bill, and it would impact every state.
Well, those baby booties, and I know there'll be some listeners who've been hard at work, knitting, crocheting, sewing, getting those baby booties together, and they'll have a multiple dimension effect. Not only will they be part of that protest, silent protest, and it's being set up and just outside of Parliament House, but then onto hospitals, whether it's just in the ACT or hopefully there's other hospitals around Australia, they'll get a secondary message that comes from those baby booties. Hey, let's talk about Queensland, the state of Queensland, and their push to decriminalize prostitution. This seems to be moving forward fairly abruptly. What's happening here?
Look, it is, and it's a terrible worry. It's a worry for our society, but it's also for me personally. I just am so worried for the girls and the women who would be caught up in what's going to happen, because basically the Queensland government wants to decriminalise prostitution completely. And what this does is actually empowers the pimps. It empowers the people who take advantage of women. It empowers the primarily men who use women's bodies for their own satisfaction. And so women are the losers in this. There are no exit strategies planned for women who want to get out of prostitution, and we know that so many of them want to leave this racket, but they can't because they're caught up in it. We know also that trafficking thrives when you have prostitution, and yet the Queensland government are ignoring global trends, and they are moving ahead with completely decriminalising prostitution. We're talking about public soliciting, so sex workers on the side of the streets, there'll be no laws against that. We're talking about advertising in public spaces. We're talking about no licensing. We're talking about no discrimination allowed even in a rural hotel room. So rural motels or hotels would not be allowed to discriminate against allowing prostitution to happen even in their premises. And so we could find that in every suburb, in any suburb, your suburb in Queensland, you have a brothel set up beside you in your street, changing the complete dynamic of where you live. And so we're fighting hard on this, but we are really needing Queenslanders to get behind us on this as well. It's not an easy subject to get involved in because no one really wants to talk or think about prostitution. It's one of those things that happen in the dark, in secret, but it won't be in secret or in the dark if Queensland have their way.
No, it's very possible it could be happening next to you, next door, your next door neighbours, and no one will be able to speak up, and no one will have any defence around the people who are arriving in their street. In fact, that could pose some sort of threat to the peacefulness and the safety of your own neighbourhood, of your own street. Hey, Wendy, there's lots more to say about that. Just to draw attention to the fact that there is a webinar on tonight explaining this Queensland push to fully decriminalise prostitution and for people to get more details. Are you leading that webinar?
I'm involved in it, but Rob Norman, our state director, Queensland state director, is leading that, but I'll be in it. And there will also be Robbie Katter, one of our MPs, is involved in that as well, who is such a strong advocate for us for the safety of our society in this area.
Okay, let's move on. There's a whole bunch of things to cover. These explicit books that were being promoted to children in Big W and Target, and as I understand, they've withdrawn those, but there's other bookstores that still have this book. Give us some insight here.
Look, I've got a copy of it here on my desk, and to be honest, it's not something I would even... my husband would not even want to look at this, and it has been so disturbing to think that some of the stuff in here that I wouldn't be able to actually speak to you on air about, it would actually be censored on air. And this book apparently is, well, certainly in the book it says it's for 11-year-olds, but one of the co-authors has said that it's suitable even for mature 8-year-olds. And I'm telling you, the explicit nature of this book has shocked me. And what it's made us aware of is that there are these books creeping into our large department stores, family stores, and so we need to be alert. We need to be aware, and particularly as adults and parents, I would say, and school teachers, Sunday school teachers, keep an eye out on what is available. Keep an eye out on what your children are actually being given, because I tell you what, if some of my young grandchildren had gotten hold of this, they would have been so shocked and made sexually aware way too young. So look, people power is an amazing thing, Neil, and people power got it off the Big W shelves. I'm not sure that it's out of Dymocks or Target yet, but I'll check on that as well today. But we've been working hard along with other organisations, Women's Forum, that organisations such as that have been working hard on this as well. And so yes, people power works, and I would encourage people to keep an eye on what their children are being given to read, what is available in any shelf.
Isn't it interesting as a Christian, because sometimes we're called prudish around these sorts of issues, and yet we will say, well, adults have a certain right to look at what they want to look at, but hey, when it comes to our kids, there's this vigilance that we have to have. And really, when you're wandering through the department store and you're looking at the children's book section, if you come across something that doesn't look right, what should you do, Wendy?
Well, there was an older woman who stood in front of the books for a very long time, and the staff were trying to move her out of Big W, to be honest, because she just did not want to allow any children to see them. But what you need to do is to, basically contact ACL or Women's Forum Australia, one of these organisations, because we can motivate lots of people to get involved. But even your one voice to go up to the counter and very respectfully say, this is not good, because the people behind the information desk are not the ones who are the buyers of this book, but they can pass on the message. Social media, again, is another really powerful way to get your message across. And this goes back to the Misinformation and Disinformation Bill, because even there, if you say that this is not suitable for children and the government disagrees, then your post can be removed. So it's a bit of a vicious cycle, but we need to get people involved in lots of voices complaining about something like this, because it shows that this is not prudish to actually say that this is wrong, because Australians right across the nation have just jumped up and down when they've seen what's in this book and that it's available for 8-year-old children. So get involved. That's what I say. Don't walk past it. You know, the whole walking past evil is never going to actually address it. So don't walk past it, because when you walk past something that you know is wrong, you actually become part of the problem.
And you might be angry about it, but as you say, Wendy, when you are alerting those people at the front counter, they're not the ones responsible. So certainly a formal way that you can actually make your protest heard without being angry at the staff. We want to honour all those retail staff. They're working in circumstances, and this is being foisted upon them too. I mean, if you work in a retail outlet and you are forced to sell things that we will say are completely immoral, and it's absolutely irresponsible to put this thing in front of children, and you work there in that retail setting, you also deserve to be protected by not having that sort of material there. Hey, let's just quickly tackle another one. Conversion therapy, a bill forthcoming in New South Wales. What's the latest here, Wendy?
Yes, there is. So before the last election, both the Labor and the Liberal Party leaders said that they would introduce a conversion therapy bill. Now, both of these leaders said that it would not be a similar one to the Victorian bill, which would disallow parents even from speaking to their children to dissuade them from wanting to take radical change to their body, or even to take puberty blockers or hormone therapy. So this is the Victorian model. So both leaders said that they would not go as far as the Victorian model, but the problem now is that the independent MP, Alex Greenwich, is introducing 3 bills, and they are absolutely as bad, if they're not worse, than the Victorian bills. And so he is pushing the Premier to actually make their bills more extreme. And so again, what we would find is that doctors would be penalised if they were not prepared to affirm a child in their gender dysphoria. So an 11-year-old child goes to a doctor. The doctor wants to be able to say, look, we need to just wait and watch this, because in time, as you go through puberty, you will settle into your natal sex. That's what the doctor wants to say, but that would be against the law, and they would be fined, and there is even jail term. So doctors are being shut down from how they want to actually really treat their patients in the best way possible. Parents are being shut down. In Victoria, it's even illegal to pray for somebody who is gender dysphoric. So in New South Wales, we're working hard there to keep the Premier to what he said, and what he said was that he would not stop parents from praying from their children or even discussing this with their children. He would not stop doctors from warning children of the consequences. And so we're really trying hard to keep him to that word.
Well, Wendy, there's more on our list. They'll have to wait. But for listeners wondering that we've had to rattle through and not take enough time even to explain the ins and outs of some of these challenging things that are happening in every state and territory and nationally around Australia, the encouragement from me is to visit the ACL website, acl.org.au, They have regular updates and articles, and you can keep abreast of what's going on, whereas all of these things are taking a hold in your own community. So if you want to be equipped to be able to stand up and to be able to speak up, my encouragement is check out the ACL website, acl.org.au. Wendy Francis is National Director of Politics at the Australian Christian Lobby. Wendy, thanks so much for another great update today on 2020.
Thank you, Neil. I appreciate it very much. God bless you.